There is a quiet power in being alone, a stillness that the world cannot give. Spiritual people seek solitude not out of loneliness, but out of a sacred need to listen to the whispers of their own hearts. In the hush of a quiet room, in the pause between thoughts, they find truths that crowds cannot speak and lessons that noise cannot teach. Solitude becomes their sanctuary, a place where the soul stretches its wings and the spirit remembers who it is. It is here, in the gentle embrace of their own presence, that they gather strength, clarity, and vision, discovering that sometimes the most profound connection is the one we have with ourselves. There is a rhythm in silence that the world rarely honors. When spiritual people step into solitude, it is not to escape, but to arrive within themselves, to meet the thoughts and feelings that have been waiting patiently, quietly, for acknowledgement. In those moments alone, they hear the soft murmur of their own hearts, a language that no crowd can interpret and no conversation can replace. The world speaks loudly, with demands and expectations, but the soul speaks softly in sighs and whispers, and it is in solitude that these whispers are heard. In the stillness, they discover the truths they have carried like fragile seeds, truths that only patience and quiet can coax into life. The mind, so often crowded with noise and worry, finds clarity in being left alone. Decisions that seemed impossible in the chaos of companionship suddenly become evident. Choices unfold like petals, revealing the path that is theirs alone to walk. In solitude, the soul is given the space to breathe deeply, to stretch, and to remember its own strength. Alone, they learn the art of listening, not just to themselves, but to the world in its quietest form. The rustle of leaves, the trickle of water, the distant call of a bird, these become teachers, companions, mirrors of the inner self. It is in solitude that intuition awakens, that the sixth sense begins to speak with clarity. They realize that answers do not always come from others, that the guidance they seek has always been within them, waiting for the courage to be acknowledged. Solitude is also a gentle healer. It mends the fragments left by disappointment, exhaustion, and the constant demands of life. It is here that the spirit replenishes its reserves, gathering energy to return to the world not broken but whole. In these quiet moments, they confront fears, embrace pain, and find grace in their imperfections. Alone, they are not lonely. They are complete, wrapped in the warmth of their own presence. This sacred aloneness nourishes creativity and insight. Ideas that were once scattered find form. Visions that were hidden emerge into light. They understand that solitude is not emptiness but fullness, the fullness of being known to oneself and of holding a mirror to the infinite within. And when they return to the company of others, they do so with generosity, with love, with wisdom born in the silence that few dare to enter. Ultimately, solitude is a teacher of connection, the deepest connection to life, to spirit, and to the self. In the quiet, they discover that the most profound conversations are not spoken aloud, but felt, understood, and embraced. It is here that they grow, that they heal, that they become luminous with the understanding that being alone is not absence, but abundance. For in the heart of solitude lies a universe waiting to be heard, a universe that reminds us all that the most sacred companionship begins with oneself. The world moves quickly, and it often moves without regard for the heart. Every day carries demands, opinions, and expectations, pressing upon the spirit until it bends under the weight of noise and distraction. For those who are spiritual, the world's constant clamor can feel like friction against the soul, leaving small scratches that grow into unseen wounds. Solitude becomes a sanctuary, a sacred pause, a place where the spirit can exhale and the heart can remember its own rhythm. In these quiet moments, they begin to heal, not by avoiding life, but by embracing the stillness that restores what the world has frayed. Life's burdens are subtle at first, a harsh word, a fleeting disappointment, a loss unnoticed by many, but over time they accumulate like pebbles in a shoe, making each step heavier than the last. Solitude allows the soul to shake off those pebbles, one by one, to walk without pain, to feel the ground beneath its feet again. It is in silence that the cracks left by life's pressures are noticed, cleaned, and mended. Here, tears may fall unobserved, sighs may rise unjudged, and the raw, tender parts of the self are given space to breathe and to be embraced. Healing in solitude is gentle, like the dawn that slowly colors the sky. It is not sudden, it does not demand attention or applause. It seeps into the bones, into the quiet corners of thought, smoothing the rough edges left by conflict and disappointment. In this quiet, the soul recalls forgotten joys, small victories, and moments of pure love that the world's chaos had hidden beneath its weight. The process is sacred because it is unhurried, intimate, and deeply personal. It teaches patience, for the heart cannot be rushed. It teaches compassion, for the self must be tended as tenderly as a fragile bloom. Aloneness in this sense is restorative. It replenishes the energy that the world drains. It renews hope that may have been dimmed, and it reconnects the spirit with the inner source of strength. In solitude, one remembers that life's value does not lie in constant activity or constant approval, but in the quiet moments where reflection meets acceptance. Here the soul gathers its fragments and weaves them into something stronger, something luminous, something resilient. And when they step back into the world, healed and whole, it is as if they have emerged from a cocoon. The noise that once threatened to overwhelm them no longer holds power, for they carry a core of calm that cannot be shaken. They move with clarity, with a quiet confidence, and with the knowledge that restoration is not a destination, but a practice, the sacred act of returning to oneself over and over again whenever life threatens to scatter the pieces. Solitude, in its quiet insistence, reminds us that healing is not a luxury, but a necessity. The world may wound, but it cannot define us. The heart may tire, but it can always recover. And those who embrace the sacred spaces of stillness discover a resilience the world cannot touch, a peace that is entirely their own, and a strength born in silence that shines even in the loudest storm. When the world is loud, it is easy to lose sight of why we walk the path we walk. Opinions, advice, and expectations surround us like a storm, and in that storm, the heart can become confused, uncertain, and weary. Spiritual people seek solitude because it is only in the quiet that the fog lifts and the path of their own soul comes into view. Alone, they peel away the layers that were imposed by others, beliefs borrowed, habits inherited, roles accepted, and begin to see the life that was always theirs to live. Solitude is not emptiness, it is revelation. It is a mirror in which the soul recognizes itself and remembers its own truth. Clarity of purpose is born from stillness. When one is alone, there are no distractions, no competing voices, no masks to wear. In that space, the mind can settle and the heart can speak. Questions that seemed impossible to answer in the noise of life suddenly become clear. What is mine to do? What calls to me from deep within? What gifts have I been entrusted with, and how will I share them? In solitude, these questions are met with honesty, and the answers are not borrowed from the world. They rise from the well of the self. Aloneness allows for reflection without judgment. The journey inward is a sacred conversation, a dialogue with one's own purpose and potential. They see where their energy has been spent chasing illusions, and they recognize where it must now be focused. Priorities shift naturally when the distractions fade, and the soul begins to walk with deliberate steps, guided by a compass that points inward. It is in these moments that life ceases to feel scattered, and intention replaces chaos. Solitude sharpens the vision of the soul. The distractions of daily life can blur what is essential, and the expectations of others can cloud judgment. But when spiritual people stand alone with themselves, clarity emerges like the morning sun breaking through mist. They see not only the path ahead, but also the pitfalls, the detours, and the milestones that will define their journey. The quiet teaches them patience, for clarity is not rushed. It is earned through attention, reflection, and the courage to confront oneself without excuses. Returning to the world with this clarity is transformative. The choices they make are no longer reactions, but conscious decisions aligned with their deepest values. They act with purpose rather than habit, with intention rather than impulse. Solitude has given them a gift, the certainty that their path, though perhaps unconventional or lonely at times, is theirs to walk and theirs to honor. In the stillness, they learn that clarity of purpose is not about certainty in every detail, but about fidelity to the self. It is about recognizing the voice of the soul amidst the noise of the world and trusting it to guide them. And in that trust, they find freedom, direction, and an unshakable sense of belonging, not to the world around them, but to the life within them, a life that is uniquely and beautifully their own. In the stillness of solitude, the whispers of the soul become audible. Spiritual people know that the world is loud with opinions, advice, and distractions, and in that noise, the quiet voice of intuition is often drowned out. But when they step aside from the crowd, when they choose to sit with themselves in silence, a subtle awakening occurs. The sixth sense, the deep knowing that cannot be explained, begins to stir. It is not learned, it is remembered as if the soul has always carried it, waiting for a moment of stillness to speak. Intuition is like a river running beneath the surface of consciousness. In the chaos of life, its waters are stirred and muddy, making it difficult to see clearly. Solitude allows the sediments to settle, and suddenly the river flows pure and strong. Decisions that once seemed uncertain now have a quiet clarity. Paths that felt hidden or obscured reveal themselves. They learn to trust the nudges of their own heart, the subtle signals that tell them when to move forward and when to pause. The world may question their choices, but the inner voice requires no approval. Alone, they cultivate patience with themselves. Intuition is not always immediate. It is a gentle presence, a quiet companion that must be listened to attentively. In solitude, they learn to distinguish between fear, desire, and wisdom. The mind often wants answers that are loud and immediate, but intuition speaks softly through feelings, dreams, and a knowing that seems to bypass logic entirely. By sitting with themselves, they learn to recognize these subtle messages, and in doing so, they become attuned not only to their own path, but to the currents of life that guide all beings. The beauty of deepened intuition is that it is both a compass and a mirror. In silence, they discover patterns in their thoughts and behaviors, insights into relationships, and understanding of life's challenges. They see where they have resisted, where they have compromised, and where they have been faithful to their true selves. Intuition becomes a quiet teacher, showing them the steps to take, the choices to embrace, and the opportunities to honor. In solitude, they learn to act not out of impulse or fear, but from a place of deep alignment with their inner truth. Returning to the world, their intuition shines like a lantern in the dark. They move with quiet confidence, knowing that even when circumstances are unclear, the inner compass will guide them. Others may doubt, the world may be uncertain, yet they walk with a trust that cannot be shaken. Solitude has gifted them a sacred clarity, a knowing that comes not from observation or instruction, but from the deep, patient dialogue with their own soul. It is here, in the quiet, that intuition is honed, strengthened, and celebrated, a force that leads not only to understanding, but to the courageous, authentic life they were always meant to live. There is a quiet liberation in showing oneself without pretense. Spiritual people seek solitude because it gives them permission to remove the masks the world expects them to wear. Each day, life asks us to perform, to smile when the heart is heavy, to speak when the mind is uncertain, to conform when the soul longs to be free. But in the stillness of being alone, they are unburdened. They are no longer actors on a stage, and the weight of expectation falls away. Here, they can simply be. Solitude becomes a mirror reflecting the self as it truly is. There is no judgment, no demand, no need to explain or defend. In this space, they can feel the full spectrum of their emotions, the depths of their fears, the expansiveness of their joys. To exist authentically is to honor both the light and the shadow within. The masks worn in public may have been necessary at times, shields against misunderstanding or harm, but they are never the truth. Alone, the soul remembers its own face and greets it with acceptance. Living without masks is a courageous act. It requires honesty and vulnerability, qualities that the world often overlooks or even discourages. In solitude, spiritual people practice this courage daily. They confront the illusions they have carried, roles they have adopted, expectations they have absorbed, and they gently lay them down. They allow themselves to cry when they are sad, to laugh when they are happy, and to speak the truths they have long silenced. In this freedom, they discover that authenticity is not fragile. It is a quiet, unshakable strength. There is also a profound peace in being real. When one no longer needs to hide behind appearances, the heart relaxes. Energy that was once spent maintaining facades is now available for growth, reflection, and love. They begin to see themselves clearly, and with that clarity comes a deeper understanding of others. For the person who walks without masks, recognizes the masks that others wear, not with judgment, but with empathy. They understand that the world pressures people to hide their truth, and in their own authenticity, they offer a silent invitation for others to do the same. Returning to the world, they carry a quiet radiance. Their presence does not demand attention, but it commands respect. They speak less to impress and more to connect. They act less to please and more to align. Solitude has given them the courage to live in accordance with their own truth, a freedom that no criticism or expectation can diminish. In shedding the masks, they become luminous, resilient, and deeply alive, a living testament to the power of authenticity, the strength of self-acceptance, and the grace of simply being who they were always meant to be. The spirit, like a garden, must be tended with care, and solitude is the sunlight that allows it to grow. Spiritual people seek moments alone, not out of avoidance, but out of necessity, to nourish what is unseen, yet vital within them. In the rush of life, the spirit can become thin, worn by constant giving, constant doing, constant striving. The world demands much, and yet it rarely asks how we are feeding the source of our own strength. In solitude, they pause, and in that pause, they drink deeply from the well of their own being. Nourishing the spirit requires attention and reverence. In quiet, they listen to the whispers of the heart, the gentle urgings that guide them toward peace and understanding. They meditate on their experiences not as burdens, but as teachers, each challenge and triumph offering lessons for the soul. Here, they cultivate gratitude for both the small and the monumental, recognizing that the spirit is fed not only by joy, but by reflection, acceptance, and the mindful tending of one's inner life. Alone, they reconnect with what is eternal within themselves. The noise of the outside world often obscures the inner voice, the part of us that knows our deepest truths and yearnings. Solitude is a sacred act of listening, a space where the spirit can remember its own rhythm, its own light. It is here that they find balance, replenishment, and a sense of wholeness that cannot be borrowed from others. In these moments, they understand that nourishment is not always physical or material. It is spiritual, and it comes from giving attention, love, and care to the self that often goes unseen. Through solitude, they also awaken creativity and insight. The spirit, when nourished, begins to radiate, casting light upon thoughts, ideas, and actions that may have been hidden beneath exhaustion or distraction. They become attuned to the beauty of life, seeing patterns, connections, and meanings that the hurried mind might overlook. The act of nourishing the spirit is not passive, it is active, intentional, and transformative. It reminds them that they are not merely living for survival, but for growth, for understanding, and for the fullness of being. When they return to the world, they do so with a calm strength that is impossible to ignore. Their presence is steady, their words intentional, and their actions aligned with the wisdom cultivated in solitude. The nourishment of the spirit allows them to give more fully, love more deeply, and face life with resilience that stems not from denial, but from deep connection with themselves. Solitude has fed their inner flame, and that flame now burns with quiet brilliance, illuminating not only their own path, but offering warmth and guidance to those around them. To nourish the spirit is to honor the sacred within, to recognize that the self must be tended with as much care as the world demands from it. Solitude is not loneliness, it is life-giving, soul-renewing, and necessary. It is the space where the heart learns, the mind reflects, and the spirit flourishes. And in this flourishing, spiritual people discover that the richest, deepest growth is never imposed from outside. It is born from the quiet, intentional acts of tending to the life within.